I'm going to show you how to glaze the Ukrainian flags properly, because if you don't glaze them properly and allow for the proper steps, then what can happen is the yellow and the blue can bleed into each other, creating some really undesirable effects. If you don't put enough glaze layers on, you'll have flags that are just washed out looking, or if colors are mixed together by not properly washing off your brushes or not using one brush per color, you'll have the blue mixing in with the yellow, creating a muddy looking green. Also note that the blue used on this batch is a lot darker than the one I'm going to use. This was a royal blue, all we had at the moment, but now we're going to be using Dutch blue, which is much lighter and more appropriate for the Dutch flag. So you can see I've started already. I have not yet done the yellow coat on these. So what I want to reiterate is how important it is to only do all the blues at once and letting them fully dry. You have to do 3 coats, 3 good coats on the front, and then all of the sides where it's blue. Okay, so see that the blue is carrying over onto the bottom. So what's really helpful for this is using a flat tipped brush and keeping it nice and clean. If it gets too much glaze on it, it will thicken and you won't be able to get a nice sharp edge. So please remember to use the blue brush for the blue glaze and the yellow brushes for the yellow glaze. If you mix the two, just wash off a brush, sometimes you won't get all of the glaze off and it will kind of muddy the color. And the reason why we're letting it fully dry before adding the yellow is because if you add the yellow right away, the 2 wet glazes can kind of overlap and blend. So what I like to do is be kind of liberal with your glaze. If you have a deep groove in the center of your flag, we're just going to suggest leaving that white. So don't try to dig inside of it. We noticed from the last batch that trying to dig inside can cause easy mix-ups of color. So we'll just leave the center line white. So I like to use the flat tip of my brush and first just outline along the line. Glaze dries really quick. You'll notice that when it dries, it gets to be a lighter value of blue. So after doing 1 full generous coat, do all of the sides. So after you do all the sides, that's 1 layer. Make sure you're not leaving any white spots other than that little curved line in the center. Okay, so we want to let that coat fully dry, and as we're doing that, we're going to start a new one. So I'm going to go back to that one next. These ones up top have 2 full coats. So instead of lining this one, I'm showing you another technique where you're getting a bit of glaze on your brush, starting below the line and just pushing up really slowly. And that also creates a nice straight line. If your brush gets dry, remember to flip it upside down because there's usually some glaze hidden on the other side. Try to pick it up by the side that doesn't have any glaze on it. Do not glaze the bottoms, that's really important, otherwise they'll stick to the kiln and they'll ruin the kiln shelves. And also, they will lift off some of the ceramic and create kind of a razor blade. We don't want anything sharp, so they would cut people. Keep them nice and soft, so don't glaze the bottoms. Okay, I know this looks like a second coat, but I was noticing some clumpiness, so I'm just evening it out. So I count that as a first coat. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the one I showed you initially. Get a nice thick coat of glaze on your brush. And if you make any mistakes, like if you got a dab of blue onto the white spot, you can use a clean brush with clean water and just scrub it off. Oh, that's what you look like. I'm sorry. All right, so when these fully dry, you're not going to use the same brush you were just using. You're going to use a brand new brush and you're going to dip into the yellow glaze. So I'm not super keen on this brush, so before I do that, I'm actually going to switch out and get another nice flat brush. See how this brush is kind of thick? That's not a very accurate brush to get in the line. So I'm going to stick to something like this that has a nice thin point.